So this is my last training session with Heath. Well, not the last one I did, but the last recorded one. Um, I'm really pleased with how consistently he's stretching now. I think as far as keeping him going, keeping him in this walk work and keeping him stretching, I think would be completely safe and helpful for him. And at this point, it's something he's strong enough to do really easily. So I think when you get back and you're able to start doing this with him, either doing it in hand with him in a bridle or lunging, either one works. He does get excitable, and so I think as far as trying to keep him sound and healthy long term, it's just a question of what your vet and you think that he can safely do. So maybe the work in hand with the bridle is better just because he can't break into the trot or canter and get kind of wild, which he does like to do. So I think one of the biggest differences I've also noticed him is just his attitude. He comes out and he's really relaxed. He tends to be, he's just a really sweet, sensitive boy. So to see him come out and not be, worried or tense really is really exciting. He just seems pretty happy to be stretching and walking around. And you'll see there's times when I'm lunging him where I don't even ask him to come back into the stretch. He'll take a couple steps, looking around and then come back into the stretch himself. And before I knew that, you didn't have any plans to continue riding him, I really felt like he's at a point where he could be ridden. But that being said, I think, the stretch is keeping him balanced, but more on the forehand than bringing him up into a working position or, with Colby doing the pee off. We don't want to put any more weight on his hind end. So this walking work is beautiful for him, and I think will continue to just be wonderful for him moving forward, keeping him sound. This is just such a lovely walk to watch. We've done in the past month probably more walk work than trot work, partly because I was very vigilant about his weight, and I did not want him to be losing. So I was just conscious until I saw kind of a gain about how much work he was really doing in the arena. And also, every time we come back to the walk work, it just makes them stronger and more consistent. So I felt like this was a great time to just come back to the walk work quite a bit. And you can see it's just made a huge difference for him. The lunge line's nice and slack, and he's just going around. One of the things I have asked, because we've been doing so much of this, I've asked him to stretch a bit deeper. So you'll see there's times like right there where he was stretching. He's not certainly, his pole isn't coming up near his, in line with his withers. He's definitely in a stretch. But I know he can stretch a little bit deeper, so I've been asking him, I've been asking a little more of him in the stretch, and you can see he's pretty willing to give it at this point, and that's really just an indication of his strength and his flexibility that he's gained over this time. So again, nothing that I'm doing is just because I felt like doing it. It's always just noticing how he's feeling, how strong he looks on a given day, how flexible he is, and all of that really comes down to the weather. It comes down to the time, how much he's been in a really deep stretch versus what I find, and I think something that's great to notice when you lunge him or work with him, is if you look at that line of the underneath of his neck, you can see right there from where his neck hits his chest to where it hits the throat latch area. Right now it's kind of even. It's parallel with the horizon. What I want to see is that line of the underneath of his neck stretching, pointing down. So there it's pointing a little bit down, there it comes up. And to me, the reason why I'm looking for that is because he could be kind of stretching down, but still holding tension and using the underneath of his neck. So if I get that neck fully, like right there, you can see he's stretching down. The like energy in his body looks really relaxed. You can see it coming forward, pushing from the hind end over his top line and down into the bit. When I have that deeper stretch, I know that muscle underneath his neck isn't going to be working. Whereas sometimes he stretches and I feel like he still is using a little bit the underside of his neck, and he does still have a stronger underside of his neck than his top line. So now that he's at this place where he's so relaxed in the stretch, and I'm not just trying to keep him stretching the whole session rather than being hollow, I'm asking him to take it that much deeper, and he is really willing to give it. And again, it's just been a matter of time. Before I was just making sure that he wasn't working in a hollow way, and now we can really ask for that more optimal stretch for him. So again, just really exciting things to see. There he came up and got a little tense, and those are like the rare moments in our training sessions now, which has been really wonderful to see. So I hope that makes sense. But again, when you start working with him, if you're doing the work in hand, email me, text me any questions, and I'm happy to troubleshoot them. You can see he comes into the trot and pretty much stretches right away, looks really relaxed. One of the things I've noticed since we've done so much walk work is that when we do come into the trot here, you can see his trot has slowed way down. He does tend to have this mindset of let me go, 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 go. So there he gets a little bit quick. I ask him to stretch. So when he's stretching, he slows down, and he's now developing that cadence that Colby has in the trot. You can see right there a little bit of like a floating trot, which again, this is just such a wonderful development to see in him. He's nice and relaxed. The trot is slow. Again, I know you don't have any intention of riding him anymore, but if you were to sit on him, he'd be really pushing you out of the saddle and giving you this really nice floating trot. I mean, he's a wonderful mover to begin with, but it's great to see rather than him just going fast that he's got this energy that can go up. Knowing that obviously there's concern about whether he should be ridden, and I don't know all the details of what your plan is as far as keeping him healthy and sound and what the vet has recommended, but this would be my one concern, knowing that he isn't necessarily going to be ridden, and for whatever reason that there's concern about that. I don't know that you would want him in this trot, only because he is pushing up, and so that is going to be more work on his joints, and obviously on his tendons and ligaments. The reason why we want to get to this place with most horses is because they're using themselves correctly, and it should be protecting the joint. So if you've ever missed a step when you're walking downstairs and then kind of landed with your legs straight rather than flexed and ready to like absorb the energy, when you land straight like that, it's very shocking. And I actually did this coming out of my trailer one time. I thought there was a step and I missed it, and I landed straight and stepped down like a whole foot, and I could feel like the shock come like straight up my body. It was very uncomfortable. When we get to this point where you can see them really like their fetlocks, everything is like flexing down, coming back up, and they're kind of doing their job, right? The joints should do that job, take the weight and then send it back out and up. It's healthy for the joint, and like for the same way that it's super unpleasant and feels terrible to take a step down without having our knees bent. It's the same reason why we want to get to this place where their back and their top line and their abdomens are working properly to help absorb this impact. So again, if he is sound to work at the trot, I think this is, um, for a normal horse, this would be really healthy to do. I just wanted to let you know kind of what I was thinking as far as, his health going forward, and what this might mean, for whether you want to work him in the trot or not. But certainly, for if you're going to work other horses and like working Colby, that's really the goal, is they develop this trot that's rhythmic and cadenced, where they're using themselves in a way that their joints stay healthy, rather than having to undergo more stress and strain than they should. So again, comes right back to a walk. He's really relaxed. He's staying stretched pretty much all of the time. And I'm just asking him, he'd like his nose to be roughly at his knees, but when he is there, that underneath of his neck is sometimes working and staying tense. And I really just want the underside of his neck to be completely relaxed. So that's why you see at times, like I ask him right there, hey, can you stretch a little bit deeper? Right here, can you stretch a little bit deeper? He gets a little tense, wants to go into the trot. The trot looks really lovely. He's staying stretched. This is, again, like just such a big difference in his trot. I'm just asking him to come back to the walk there. So he has a lot of forward energy. He has a lot of relaxation right now, and we've gotten to a place where, rather than just rushing, he looks really cadenced and really rhythmic. It's nice to, it's just pleasant to watch him working. It looks nice. And he has such a soft mouth. When I ask him to stretch a little bit deeper, it really doesn't take really any pressure. He's pretty much immediately responds and stretches down deeper. So that's just kind of the next step of what I had been doing with him in this lunging work. And again, I think if keeping him out of the trot is the goal, then I think working him, he's gone to a place where he can come out and work on the lunge line in the walk only, and he doesn't break into the trot, and he doesn't gallop off and get wild. So I think you could work him on the lunge line, but I do think you could either work him in the bridle or on the lunge line. He's pretty happy to stay in the walk here. And again, this was his harder side, so it's really lovely to see how much easier it's gotten for him. You can see when he came around there, he's still bent to the outside. So, additional body work, I think would help him. But only to some extent. I do think that he's aware of, his right hind, and is always probably going to be a little bit, what's the right word? Compensating for that. But I do think some body work would help him get a little bit straighter now that he is stretched so well over his top line. And even just this lunging work is going to help him. He's a lot straighter than he used to be. It's a matter of time, but I do think the body work would help a little bit. One of the things he does on the lunge line is sometimes he likes to make the circle a bit smaller on one side. So generally he tends to cut in a little bit towards me when he's going around this part of the circle. So I do send him out a little bit, but him being so sensitive with the whip, I do it, more slowly just to give him some fair warning. But I always just make sure, the same way that with when I'm riding Colby, that I maintain the contact. So even if he cuts in, I just, rather than leaving the line slack and sending him out, I take the line back up to maintain the contact and then move him back out on a circle a bit. And that's just to keep the contact consistent, so that if he does want to hollow and get tense, which generally the case, he's cut in because he's like looking at something, I'm just maintaining that contact consistently, and he's getting the release when he's full, when he's down here in the stretch. So you can see there, right before I asked him to stretch, that underline of his neck. It's just interesting to watch. Here he's more neutral. He's not stretched as deeply as I would want him. But it's still a stretch. So that's just the one thing that I'm kind of looking for, is occasionally I'll just ask him, can you stretch a little bit deeper for me and release the underside of your neck a little bit more? You see right there, that's beautiful. His nose is pointed out, the walk is nice and relaxed and big, and that the underside of his neck is also kind of following that same line, down from the shoulder that his, if you look along his top line. Obviously, from withers to pole, his pole's down. But on the underside of his neck, it's not always going down from the shoulder towards his throat latch. Right there, it gets a little better. That looks nice. That gets even a little bit deeper of a stretch. And that's pretty good. Comes up, goes down. So it's always, it's never staying in the exact same spot, but it's just something that you can keep an eye on, because he is stretching so well. You can use that as kind of a guide for whether to ask him for a little bit deeper of a stretch or not. Again, he's pretty naturally forward, so I generally don't need a lot of whip, or, if I was doing it with the bridle, he doesn't need a lot of like the dressage whip tapping to keep him forward. But if he does, if you do take the contact up and he slows down when you're asking for that deeper stretch, you just back it up with a light tap, or, flicking this dressage whip. Overall, I just feel like it's been such a big improvement in the past month for him. I really don't have to do a whole lot when I'm lunging in. He comes out and he's really happy to stretch, and he's pretty happy to give me a fairly deep stretch as well. So, this work is really just going to continue to make him stronger in the right ways. And hopefully this is also just a great indication that like, if you decide that most of his work or all of his work is just going to be in the walk, like how strong they can get from just doing this walk work. Because the improvement in his trot from last month to this month is, I mean, it's incredible. He's developed this wonderful trot, and it really just came out of doing the walk work. So, again, whether he trots, you work him in the trot or not, this walk work has just made such a big difference in his body. So, I think just continuing to do this foundational work will just help him stay nice and sound and healthy and relaxed, for the rest of his days. So he starts off a little bit tense in the trot here. And so even though his stretching is getting really consistent, he's really where Colby was right before I started riding her. So the transitions, you still see that he loses the stretch in the transitions, and he gets a little quick sometimes rather than staying in that slower rhythm and stretching, because that's just hard to do. It's harder work for him. So you see him develop a nice stretch, and for the most part, he's that's really nice right there, and he's coming back into the stretch really easily. But the trot, obviously, it's not as consistent as the walk. So for him, definitely more walk work will be great. I think it'll make a big difference. So there, he's a little slow, which is nice. I actually like the rhythm there. What I want is a stretch and a little bit more just an inkling of thinking more forward. He was a little bit tense, and he's a little bit thinking of stopping, but I don't really want him to go any faster. That looks lovely right there. And again, you can look at the underside of his neck there. He's stretching, and his poll was lower than his withers, but the underside of his neck was actually, his throat latch was a little bit higher than where it ties in at the base of his shoulder. So again, just something to think about. Asking for that next step, whether it's in the trot or the walk, is that he can look like he's kind of stretching, but still be tense in the underside of his neck. So for him, with this work in hand and the lunging, whatever gait, that would be my focus. You see, Kim's right back to the walk, gives a nice stretch, and even that base of his neck or even the underside of his neck is relaxed and soft there. So the underside of his neck, as he just walked past, was not really soft and relaxed. So I asked him for a little deeper of a stretch here, and he gives it to me. And that's really what I'm looking for. The underside of his neck to also be, look like it's stretching down rather than just straight out across or coming more upright. Kind of neutral there, and then obviously it's tensing. We lose the stretch completely, but overall just so much more consistent. So you can see how well balanced he is, even in this deep stretch. A lot of people worry about being on the forehand, but what we're not seeing is that he's, tripping. He's balanced, but but I think for him, always keeping him in the deepest stretch you can is going to keep any extra weight off of his hind end, which is definitely what we want for him. So the deeper the stretch, the better, and I don't think there's ever any reason to bring him into a working gait. I don't think necessarily that, the working gait's really a more neutral position, but as far as like, it shouldn't really be sending weight back. But keeping him stretching, I think, is really ideal. The other thing is that I know I've mentioned this before, but this is a really big arena, and so he's working on much bigger than a 20-meter circle. It's probably closer to 30 meters. And again, that, like, those straight lines that you can do with working him in the bridle in hand and just walking him like all the way around the arena, is going to be great for him too. So, the super big circles, I think, are great, but then you have even more space when you can take him down all the way down the long side when he is stretching with the work in hand and the bridle. So you can see there he got just a little tense, so rather than continuing to walk with him, I just stood still to kind of take a little bit of contact and then just encouraged him forward with the whip, and he stretched right back down. And again, sometimes he doesn't need a lot of more encouragement forward, just a little bit of contact to remind him to stretch. And otherwise, I just, at the lunge line, there's a lot of weight in the lunge line, so you're not really working off the weight of the rein so much. I generally do have it slack just because there's already a little bit of pressure on his mouth just from the weight of this, cotton lunge line. Yeah, nothing really else to add. He just looks so relaxed and so strong now. It's been, I mean, it's incredible to think the first session I had with him where we were really just, he had no concept of stretching and was very tense about it. And then to see him now, he just is moving totally differently and so relaxed now. It's just been a pleasure to work with him. So again, if you have any questions, again, reach out anytime. I'm happy to answer and get you guys, continuing this work if that's what you choose to do.